Hi, listeners. Welcome to the Grief Out Loud podcast produced by the Dougie Center for Grieving Children. I'm Jana DeCristofaro and wanted to give you just a little heads up as you listen to this episode. You'll be hearing references to our old name, which was Dear Dougie. So just so you don't get too confused, you're listening to the right podcast, and we look forward to bringing you even more great content under the Grief Out Loud name. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dear Dougie podcast, produced by the Dougie Center for Grieving Children. I'm Jana DeCristofaro, and thank you for tuning in today. This podcast is meant to open up the often avoided conversation about grief. While loss is something we will all experience throughout our lives, when it occurs, most of us are left not knowing what to do, how to feel, or how to talk about it. So whether you're grieving a loss or wanting to support someone who is, we hope these podcast conversations lead to a better understanding of grief and also give you some ideas and inspiration for how to show up for yourself and those you care about. When it comes to grief, one of the challenging parts is that there's no playbook or recipe to follow. And while people are drawn to remembering and honoring the person who died, many people find themselves lost when it comes to figuring out, how can I do that in a way that feels right to me and authentic for me and the person who died? Today I'm joined by Jodie Brauer, the founder of the Celebrate Silas event, to talk about the everyday rituals that can arise while grieving, the things that we do to find comfort and to honor the person in our life who has died. Welcome back to Dear Dougie, Jodie.
Thank you.
The last time you were here, we really talked a lot about the event, Celebrate Silas, that you organize. And for listeners who are new to you and your story, can you share a little bit about the event and how it came to be?
Sure. My baby Silas died of SIDS 1 week after he turned 1 in March 2011, and I was having a hard time with my grief, understandably, and kind of not coping in very healthy ways. So I decided to train up to run 12 miles, 1 mile for each month he lived, and to run those 12 miles on his second birthday, since he would not be there to celebrate with us. So it would give me something, a physical goal to do, and then an activity to do on his birthday. And I had some friends that trained up to do the whole 12 miles with me, and then another group of friends that walked a shorter 4-mile loop. And so that's what we did to celebrate his second birthday. On the 4th year, we decided to open the event up to the public and hold it as a fundraiser for the Dougie Center.
So over time, the event really transformed from something that was just personal for you to how do we make this an event that's more welcoming to the community and creates more of a group experience.
Yeah, and it's really has totally evolved. Like the first year that we invited the community, it was actually on Silas's birthday. So we sang happy birthday as a group, we had birthday cake as a group, and all of those things. And then over the years, when Silas's birthday did not fall on a weekend, it wasn't convenient to invite the community to come for this birthday party, and so then we separated the event from his actual birthday, and tried to also have ways to include the community and to honor their person that they might be grieving. Kind of, my hope is that like the Celebrate Silas can become like a ritual per se for folks who are grieving, to have a chance to remember their loved one and kind of grieving as a community. Like grief is just so often done in isolation. So I feel like I like that aspect, that it's evolved in that way to help folks who are grieving. But you can also just come and run it as a 5K with not a heavy heart.
When that first year happened, of like setting the goal to run your 12 miles and doing that with a small group of friends, could you ever envision that you would be in the place you are now where you're organizing this large event and trying to make it more of a community remembrance?
No, this never crossed my mind at all when I started to do it. I mean, I didn't even think I'd be able to possibly train up to run 12 miles. I just knew I wanted something to do, and moving my body seemed to help me with my grief. And I was very fortunate to have a neighbor that also was interested in getting in shape, and her daughter had just started preschool, so she would show up on my doorstep 3 or 4 times a week ready to run. I'm very grateful for that.
And since most people, not everyone, but most people who are in their own grief likely aren't going to start a big community event like you have, although please do, everyone out there, start community events. What are the things that you found yourself doing just in your day-to-day life of the rituals? And just a little side note about the word ritual. That word can have a lot of weight. It can be a pretty intimidating word. I mean, I think ritual, I think I have to have something written down, and there must be like 9 people who have signed off on it, and there probably should be some music and maybe a bell. And so often what people are grieving is the loss of the routines that they shared with the person who died, whether that was in their day-to-day life or maybe on an annual basis around a birthday or some other significant day. And so I hear a lot of people who, when they're in grief, they're trying to figure out, how can I recreate a routine to give myself some structure, and how can I create a routine that helps me stay connected to the person who died? What were some of the just day-to-day rituals and routines you found yourself turning to in your grief?
I think the ones that I found myself turning to at the beginning of my grief are things that I no longer do, but were important at that time. Lighting candles was really important to me in the beginning. I think I would light a candle every evening at bedtime. And I remember my husband Peter and son Felix, we had hung a bunch of pictures of Silas up in his room, and we would go and say goodnight to his picture, because I didn't have that bedtime routine. I wasn't nursing a baby, I wasn't reading board books. So we would say goodnight to this picture, and it was interesting. My son Felix got to the point where he would say, "Goodnight, Silas's picture." And so we did that for a few months, but then that was no longer important. Candle lighting, that kind of tapered off. Instead of every night, it was like on holidays or birthdays, or there's a worldwide candle lighting that happens in October for Infant Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day. I lit candles just at those occasions, and now I think I lit a candle at Christmas time, but I'm not sure. It's just not as important to me now.
Here at the Dougie Center, so many people are drawn to candles. I mean, we do candle lightings in our groups. So many people do light candles at significant days. Do you have a sense of what your draw was to the actual lighting of a candle?
Well, it had a couple of meanings. In fact, there's actually a candle as our logo for Celebrate Silas. It represents life and light, and you can light it and it kind of holds space for your person. And for me, he had just had his first birthday, so it was like we had it for one candle on the birthday cake. So it really for me, encompasses both life and death.
What are other ways that you carried him with you into the world?
That's a good question, because that's been really important to me. Shortly after he died, I printed up tons of pictures. People asked how they could help me, and I'm like, buy me picture frames. So pictures are very important to me. And a ritual, I guess, that I continue is I have a necklace that was given to me that has a picture of Silas's face on it. So I still wear that almost every day. For me, it's very important, since Silas is not here as a 6-year-old boy holding my hand and playing at the park and there for people to ask me about. It gives him a physical presence in the world, even though he's not physically here in the world. And so I like to think that it invites people to continue to ask about him. But in the first few years after Silas died, I brought pictures of him with me everywhere. On camping trips, to my in-laws, to beach houses. Everywhere I would bring 4x6 or an 8x10 photo to give Silas a presence. Just everywhere I went, and to remind my friends and family that he was here in my heart, even though he wasn't physically there. And I'm not sure that my friends would have forgotten that he had recently died, but it was just meaningful to me.
And it seems almost like a combination of not only having him there to come along with you in adventures of life, but also as a reminder to people that you're carrying grief with you, even if you may be out doing something that outwardly looks celebratory.
Absolutely. For me, the first, 2 years, I felt guilty when I was having fun. And so it was nice, the picture was a reminder that I am grieving, even though I have a smile on my face, and I'm having to move forward in my life, but I'm carrying him with me.
And interesting too that you're wearing your picture right now of Silas and in your necklace, and to invite people to ask you questions. And I have heard from other people where they prefer to do things that are more private. So maybe they wear a necklace that belonged to the person who died, but they wear it inside their shirt because it's too hard to have people ask them questions about it. And so just for listeners out there to know that as grief is so different for everyone, that there are rituals that might be very public and involve other people, and there may be rituals and routines that are private and just for you.
Sure, yeah, it's such a vulnerable time when you're grieving. Everybody has to choose what's right for them.
Were there things that people recommended to you, ritual, routine types of things, either maybe from helping professional or friends or family, and you were like, no, that doesn't work for me at all?
I'm a secular person, and so many people suggested that I start going to church or have a relationship with God, so I could think of Silas as being, in heaven or continuing on in the afterlife. Would include platitudes like he's in a better place or it all happened for a reason, and that was really hard to hear and not helpful to me at all.
A lot of people find comfort in almost entertainment sometimes in being able to keep talking to the person who died, and so they'll find themselves talking out loud at particular times of the day or times of the year. And for me, I can't bring myself to talk out loud to the person who died, but I will sometimes say something in my head.
Oh, that's interesting. I talk out loud to Silas all the time. In fact, I often go to the bench at the rhododendron garden and have big, long conversations with him there, telling him about what's going on with my life, or telling him how much I miss him, or expressing anger with him for dying. I talk to him all the time.
Sometimes people feel like they have to really plan ahead for these rituals and routines. When you look at the routines and rituals you've created over the last 6 years, how many of them were like conscious decisions, and how many of them are like looking back and saying, oh, that's why I was doing that. That was actually connected to my grief.
Well, the Celebrate Silas was death. That was very intentional because I was coming up with a specific strategy to cope with the birthday. And I guess I have specific rituals, if you want to use that word, that I've developed, that I do on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death. So those things were definitely intentional. The bringing the pictures around everywhere, that was just something that I just felt like I needed to do. I was compelled to do it. I was not thinking I'm going to come up with a ritual to make this easier. I just kind of felt like I didn't even have a choice.
It was just an urge, and
Yes.
I followed through on it.
Yeah, and so that it was just looking back that I kind of realized that I could be defined as a ritual.
So listeners out there, don't feel pressure to have a long rationale and meaning behind the things that you're thinking will help you stay connected or bring you comfort or solace in some way, that you can just follow what's feeling instinctual.
Yes, certainly. I would definitely encourage people to follow their instinct. I felt like I have had something kind of guiding me through this journey inside. I don't know what it is. Do the rituals or routines that are helpful, but then also to abandon them if they don't feel helpful anymore. I've talked to some folks who are grieving who felt reluctant to come up with a new routine to honor the person because they were afraid if they forgot sometime or didn't feel like doing it anymore that they would be some way dishonoring that person.
That they would get an F for their grief ritual for that year.
Yes, failed at the grief ritual and then just feels totally guilty about that. So that's not been true for me, and I guess I would encourage people to just follow their hearts and do what's meaningful in that moment.
And to change it up if need be, and if you forget, it's okay.
Yeah.
Let that happen.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you don't love your person, you don't miss your person.
You've had a number of interactions with hundreds of grieving people at this point. From being part of the Dougie Center. Are there other rituals and routines that you've heard people talk about that they've found to be helpful?
Most often, I hear about people decorating the tombstones at cemeteries or gravestones. They bring flowers and balloons and write letters to their person on their anniversaries. I found just rereading the sympathy cards, kind of a really simple ritual that I would do every so often when I just wanted to feel kind of connected to my grief.
What would come up for you as you reread those cards?
Well, I did that fairly early on, so I was pretty much sobbing most of the time. It'd be interesting to go back and do it now, because so much of that first year is a blur for me, and I hear that from other grieving folks, and so it'd be interesting to see who even wrote the sympathy cards, who sent them.
One of the other things I've heard people talk about is having intentional gatherings of friends and family to share memories. There's lots of ways that it seems like people find to actively remember the person who died, whether that's in community or just individually, whether it's writing down a memory a day and putting it on a slip of paper and putting it in a jar, and then once a month going through those memories just to help keep those present for people.
Yeah, I saw a grief counselor for several years after Silas died, and she definitely encouraged me to write down my memories, especially in the beginning. And I know she was trying to do me a favor because they do start to fade.
For a lot of kids, at least, who, maybe they were 8, 9, 10, 11 when their person died, if it was a parent or a caregiver or even a sibling, they were so young when the person died, they only had 7 years worth of memories of their dad as their dad, and they really value hearing from people who knew their dad at different times in that person's life. So if you are someone out there who's supporting people who are grieving, remembering that your memories are really valuable too. Documenting those in some way and sharing them with the person who's grieving can be really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Silas lived a little over a year, but after he died, I definitely sent a book around to all my friends and families asking them to write down their memories, and it was very important to me.
Do you have a ritual or routine around that book now that you have all those memories?
I don't. I created a book kind of with pictures and memories in it around the first anniversary mark. And so every year on his birthday, I get that book out and I read it. So it's kind of a compilation of the things that friends remembered and stories I remembered.
Sometimes when you're grieving in a family, since it's you and your husband and your other son Felix, people have to figure out ways to get their ritual and routine around grief to negotiate with other people's comfort or discomfort with their rituals or routine. Has that been part of your experience? Have you and Felix and your husband had to kind of figure out how to make space for each other's rituals and routines, or lack of rituals and routines?
Certainly, yeah. Peter and I have grieved very differently from the start. I felt like just buried from a tsunami, I think is how I described it in the last podcast, and I just want to talk about my grief all the time. And Peter would just go to work and just kind of try to just carry on. I mean, even though he was certainly grieving, that we just had very different styles. And Felix, I'm sure that he was just had no idea what was going on. He was 4 years old. It's like, what is going on with my family? And my mom's a crazy person. But in terms of direct rituals, Peter's always been on board with the Celebrate Silas and the running for his birthday. I continue to run 12 miles every year on his birthday, and Peter does a portion of that, whatever he can manage to train up for, but he does take the day off, and we have a birthday cake, and we go through the book, and actually also a collection of videos that we have. But it's important to me to have a ritual around the anniversary of his death. But that has not been interesting to Peter to do that. He doesn't want to mark the day. It was a horrible day. I can totally understand why he wouldn't want to remember it. But for me, it's important. So I've got my sister. She comes along with me, and she actually takes the day off work to be there, and I drag Felix along with us, and he humors me.
So making sure that there's opportunity for people to speak up for what they need, but also recognizing that not everyone in their family is going to necessarily want to do or be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, it is just so hard, especially in the beginning. I think it's important to give yourself a lot of space and be gentle with yourself as well as with the other people in your family who are grieving.
If people want to sign up for Celebrate Silas, since that's coming up pretty soon on
It's March 5th this year. Yes, we have the website is up and running. It is www.celebratesilas.com, and our goal is to raise $10,000 for the Dougie Center in Silas's memory. We have managed to do that the last 2 years, so I'm optimistic we can do it again. And so, yes, please sign up, register, join us.
And if you're listening in Iowa and you're not going to fly into Portland for the weekend of Celebrate Silas, how can people who aren't here in the Portland area still be part of it?
Well, we would love it if they wanted to make a donation and help us reach our fundraising goals. And also, if they have someone they want to remember at our event, I read a list of names at the beginning, and there's a spot on the registration form when you register for you to put the name or names of folks that you'd like to have remembered at the event.
So you can participate no matter where you live. If you're listening here in the U.S. or all across the globe, please go to celebratesilas.com and register. I'll put that in the show notes as well. And thank you again, Jodie, for all your work to support the Dougie Center, but also to create an opportunity for our community to come together and be active and remember the people in our lives who have died. So I really appreciate all that you've done for that.
Thank you very much. It was nice to be here.
And thanks everyone for tuning in today. If you'd like to check out our past episodes, including the one Jodie and I did last year, you can go to www.dougy.org and find our podcast tab, or you can find us on iTunes or any other podcast platform that you are utilizing. And if you have ideas for anything you'd like us to be talking about in the future, please send us an email at help@dougy.org. Thanks for listening. Hope you'll join us again next time.
Thanks for listening.